Hearing some combat break out in the next chamber, I rush forward, and one hand goes into a pocket and pulls out a little bit of bat guano, and my other hand snagging some spider web off of the wall as I follow my companions into the other room. And in process in the midst of this, I start making a chant, a bit of a cadence going on here, because I don't know what's coming up. And as soon as I come into the other room and I see, Dwayne's over there fighting the ogre, and two more ogres are coming hard up another corridor, I turn around and immediately cast spiderweb. Right? Yeah. Spell components are useful, or a real pain in the back. I mean, and other things. First off, let's talk about my apologies once again. I would like to have done this a little different. I like to have a little face, but once again, I cannot get this. I'm lucky I got a down view. I do not know how to get this thing to give me the ability to switch back and forth between cameras on the laptop itself, which is probably a good thing, because then I'd have to go out in the other room and get a T-shirt or something. Even though I got the AC running in the house, it is like 101 outside with the humidity. This room is a bit stuffy, which is, a bit odd. Anyhow, spell components. This is one of those numerous sets of rules. We talk about rule sets. You talk about any game system you have. It's made up of skill or rule sets, certain sets of rules for certain situations or certain outcomes or certain whatever. And so this includes these things like, encumbrance and land travel, things like are you keeping have you got enough food and water and et cetera, et cetera. Are you managing your group well? When it comes to the spell components for wizards, I think this is probably next to encumbrance is the next thing to get discarded by majority of players and GMs. It just does. And it's easy to see why. We do wink and nod. So your wizard is assumed to restockpile all their components whenever they get an opportunity. Or in some cases, I can remember back in the day where, we just go store and we're going to buy, go to the local magic shop, as if every small town and thorp in the world had a magic shop, and buy a bag of spell components, and booyah. Well, we weren't even doing that correct, because if you really do your homework and you go down through many of these spells and you look at the components required, a lot of spells actually require very few components, but some of these components can be extremely expensive, monetarily speaking. If you want to talk about one way to mediate how much wealth your player character group accumulates, wizards are not cheap. We're not even talking about them trying to maintain a tower somewhere so they can do studies and things like this, and to research and all the materials that cost that requires. And we're just talking their everyday operational expenditures from their magic. And that in itself can be a pain in the butt for anybody. Or it can be a real opportunity that's getting that you may be missing out on, in my opinion, of course. And I'm guilty of all of this. I have done many campaigns where if the players just don't want to be bothered with it, I don't sweat it. It's like sitting there and saying, well, you can't cast that spell unless you did the special feature, you did the maneuver, you hopped on 1 foot, and you spit 3 times. It does. Well, yeah, but you're supposed to actually do all this. Oh, I don't want to do all that stuff. It's stupid or it's silly. Anyway, you get the idea. The other side of it is a time component. It's yet another thing. This was one of those reasons I suspect, and I know that there's plenty of people out there far more in depth learned about what was in Gygax's ideas and mindset back in the day than I'll ever be. But I'm going to work on the assumption that in the early days they realized the magic users were very, as both as opponents and as players, were very powerful and could quickly become too powerful. And so they tried to find as many ways as possible to mitigate that, to pare them down or put them on some parallel setting with the other character classes. The fighter, for example, early on is actually quite weak. and quite unflexible. It's not until they've developed and they've gained some experience and at some levels and that you've added more feats or more skill sets and et cetera, and that they become much more invincible. And at some point, they become, literal murder machines. They're almost impossible to stop once they get to a sufficiently high level. It takes sufficiently high another opponent of equal worth or somebody with some serious firepower. That's where the wizard comes in. So wizards, spellcasters in general, if they were allowed to, would become extremely overpowering and unbalancing. It's one of those challenges. For example, if you cross genre, if you go over to Star Wars as a player and as a game master, this was always a conundrum and a bit of a challenge at most of the tables I played at and that I ran, was that the Jedi, with all of their ability, especially when they become better Jedi, when they become more advanced, actual Jedi Masters, things like this, the amount of abilities, they just far surpass the average of every other player there. Then you all become supporting actors to the one Jedi. And it makes for pretty lopsided campaigns and games, especially if you have a group of people that really don't understand the nuanced differences that ought to be in play. And so what do? One of the things I always did was let's either do it this way. We do an all Jedi campaign, meaning that everybody here has Jedi, some kind of Jedi, force or some sort of force skills and stuff that would complement the Jedi and not necessarily, be totally eclipsed by the Jedi. Or we do a non-Jedi Star Wars campaign, which is great. You can do all kinds of stuff and never see a damn Jedi at all in the setting. It's not all that, it's not everything that needs to be there. Now, in science fiction or in fantasy games and sword and sorcery, to not have magic is, kind of pointless. I mean, it's half the point of the game is that magic, right? So the fact is that a lot of players found these items, it's just unnecessary or inconvenient, so we discard them. You look at from the aspect of the archer, and I use this pretty liberally on occasion. Once again, we have a bad habit, both as the game master or storyteller, whatever the hell you want to call yourself, and the players, to forget that the arrows is a finite source. You want to add some real challenge or something interesting to a campaign or a game, that's when you sit there and you start really making resource management matter. Because I used to argue, look, you just fired a couple arrows off into the woods. Roll a dice to see if you find them. And here's the penalty for it. This is the difficulty factor. It's not going to be that easy to do. The other side of that would be breakage. So one of the things I like, I rolled a natural one. Well, okay, 50-50. I'd flip a quarter. I'd flip a six-sided dice and odd and even. Okay, odd, your arrows broke. Now you only have 39 arrows, not 40. And magic arrows are not indestructible either. They too can be damaged and destroyed or lost, and you keep track of that stuff. And suddenly your Legolas of the group is becoming very paranoid about firing his arrows off because he's down to his last 9, and he wants to make sure that every last one of them counts, and he wants to be able to retrieve them because he doesn't have time to manufacture more, and there hasn't been a passing merchant caravan that he could buy some off of. So sometimes it's just as important scavenging those items from the battlefield, even if they, orc arrows are crap. Well, they're better than nothing. Here's a -2 for using orc-made arrows, but guess what? At least they're arrows. And Legolas here should be able to use them all day long and still get quite good results, right? So one of those things that we look at, all right, so, most components are considered rare. And some of them extremely rare. Now, I need 3 drops of red dragon blood. Well, what store do you go to get your red dragon blood at? A friendly red dragon is willing to part with some blood for some coin? Or you get what I'm saying here. I mean, that doesn't pan out. Then there's the the sheer cost. Some of them require god awfully expensive gemstones to be used up. For 10,000 gold piece sapphire, and it's going to be turned to pulverize it to dust and use as part of. It's going to become part of the spell. So you just threw 10,000 gold pieces into this spell. It better work. And then there's the time-consuming thing. This is one of those things that was supposed to help mitigate, make the magic users less of a threat, or more on equal footing with the fighters and the thieves of the era. In my mind, the wizards have almost no hit points. They use a D4 versus everybody else. They're very soft and squishy. They're not allowed to wear armor. They're not allowed to. Their weapons are almost ludicrous. They got a dagger and they got a staff. They're not going to be very martial with them, and so this makes them totally more and more dependent on that spell set. And so if it takes you time to pull the various components out, and this is one of those reasons when they talk about spell casting, when they talk about a spell taking a full round or several rounds, part of that is prepping the spell itself and everything that goes into it. So what do we do about that? How do we address spell components being or making spell components something of a bit more of a useful item in your campaign at your table? Well, let's think about that for a second. Let's go back to what I said. Most components are considered rare. So by all rights, there should, unless you're in a massive city. Most towns and villages and thorps are not going to have a local apothecary who carries magical components outside of what we consider normal stuff. And then in my example, when I opened the video with, is kind of my point, even though I babbled it. I actually, I actually wrote that down, but then I didn't bother to read it, so I just kind of hashed it. Welcome to my world. It's been so long since I've been able to actually role play it. So I'm so out of practice, it ain't funny anyhow. The point I'm getting at is that a number of spell components are not rare. Spider webs everywhere. Now, if you need a giant spider web for your spell, now you've got a rare item. Bat guano. Bat guano is a bit rare. It's a little harder to get, but it's not. It's also used in other non-magical applications. So there are people who go out there and harvest that. And so you can get it. It's just going to be maybe a little harder to get. But the idea that my character could have some component in possession, pulling out some bat guano while grabbing some webbing off the wall as I'm running past and mashing them together to get what the effect that I'm going for, even though I'm not saying that's the two components you would need to do a damn web spell, but I'm just trying to get a point out there and trying to be entertaining as well. So one of these ways we can look at that is the components are rare and expensive. They're also time consuming. Another way to look at time consuming is how do we get them? Once again, you should not be able to just walk into any town, village, and thorp and just walk up to the local magic shop and buy everything you need. And it's just like you walk into a town of 400 people and you ask them, I need to get a 10,000 gold piece sapphire now. Who's got one for sale? The whole bloody town is not worth 10,000 gold pieces. So I suspect nobody's got that. No. So, what are you going to do? And so if that spell is something you like to fire off, how many times did you fire that off in this campaign? Oh, you fired off 450, 70,000 gold pieces worth of magic spells? How? Where'd your money come from? Right? Once again, magic users, if you look at it from that perspective, are a money pit. You get a lot for what your bang for your buck, but there's a lot of bang going down, a lot of bucks going down the tube to get that bang. And obviously the wizard's cut isn't going to be sufficient enough. And that was also something else to consider. The wizard should, when you're in a campaign and you guys are looting out something and you find some, a treasure with some gems or some magic items, your magic user should always get first dibs. Period. They should be able to go in there and identify the gemstones they think of value. And that's another thing. Can your wizard actually identify the value of the gemstone? Do they have that skill set? That's a skill. That is something that they need to learn, or they need to invest in, or they need to have a third party verify the value. Once again, adding to expense and time consumption, making him less of attractive of a player, or of a companion, because now we got to go chasing down this, that, and the other thing. So one of the things I have done in the past was I had a quest for a component. The group comes up and decides they need to do this thing, or they want to achieve this thing, or the wizard gets this spell. And I said, I've been sitting on this spell forever, and I just want to use it because it's so neat. Well, why don't you? Well, I need, I don't know, a 10,000 gold piece sapphire. Or I need 3 drops of dragon's blood. Red dragon's blood, and it has to be fresh. Where do I get it? Who do I go buy it from? Well, perhaps that's your quest. You just decided we need to get these components so our wizard here can do this spell. We need to track down a willing red dragon that's willing to donate, or we need to track down a red dragon we can just take it from them, with all the fun and deadly consequences that potentially can come with that sort of encounter, right? Yeah, another possible outlet is that the group itself takes on a job to go collect some kind of rare spell components. I actually had a player group once, oh geez, this is 28 years ago, and 2 of the players discovered just how valuable various components and stuff were of these monsters that they were out slaying, that they were just absolutely driven to figure out a way to capitalize on that. And this went us down several rabbit holes. One of them was to acquire, I forget what it was, some kind of vessel that would, whatever you put in it basically is stationary. So if you put those three drops of fresh red dragon's blood into this thing, when the time comes, it will still be fresh dragon's blood when you open it and utilize it, right? And then there was the market. They discovered, Jesus, so they go hunt down. They would actually start tracking down specific monsters, because this one, no, we don't want that one. We want that one, because that one, this part, that part, and that part, woo, we're going to get paid. And it became it was kind of amusing. It was something different. It is what it is. So there are a number of ways to figure out how we can put components in. Now, one of the things that I kind of got a middle ground here, and this is what I settled on for a lot of groups back in the day when we started talking about this stuff. Well, you're getting way too much loot in the first place. So if we average, we go out and we've been out on 16 campaigns, we now have an average idea of how much magical spells are used by our wizards and our clerics in a certain given amount of time. And then we can go and say, okay, well, based on their levels and the spell component costs, we should be allotting 5,000 gold pieces every week in game, or every milestone in game, or something like this, however you want to play it out. Then the party would then have to make sure that they had the gold pieces to cover the expense, and so the gold pieces are then deducted from whatever value the group has or accumulates. And this is one way of throwing money out. You've brought your loot in, now it's going away. You see, it doesn't stick around. Money doesn't. Money wants to keep moving, and it wants to be in somebody else's possession, because somehow it's going to be more flattering, or it's going to be thicker, or whatever. So there's some ideas. How do we deal with bringing components and making them useful? Like I said, I thought one way was just say, okay, you just cost the group this amount of money every cycle, or every session, based on your caster's spell levels. And of course, as they progressed, so did the expense, which meant the group had to make sure that they were generating more and more treasure every month or so, every so many sessions. Otherwise, they would actually go in the hole. And that's why I showed a different video on the first edition AD&D character sheets, and there's a small piece in there that talks about players' debts and obligations. Think about that for a minute. Why did they include an entry for player debts and obligations? Think about it. So it's just one of those possible scenario things. You just kind of wonder. Anyway, you guys have yourself a great week. We are in the first week of August as of the moment I'm doing the video. The great State Fair of Iowa opens up on Thursday, so the wife and I are going Saturday. That'll be my first damn actual day off since a week and a half ago when I was sick. And being sick doesn't really count as a day off. At least I don't think it does. At least I don't think it should. But I didn't get paid for it. The jobs had to be made up. And we're into a feast month, which means I get lots of hours each week. When I get average of 50 a week, I consider it a good month. The downside is I probably work 65 hours to get that 50 because the way these split shifts play out. And then I start babbling, and you hear it on here. You hear it here all the damn time. You heard it here first, last, second.